Hello everybody, Maven here, and they buffed Glaives this season, and they also buffed the Triton Vice this season. So it's time to revisit that ridiculous Triton Vice build I made on the channel like a month ago. Since I did that video so recently, I'll try to keep this one brief, but no promises. I'll link that other video I did on it in the card up above in the description down below, and I encourage you to check it out. That build, let me tell you, it's something else. It's probably the funnest hunter build, and maybe even the funnest build in general that I've ever created. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback from people who have tried it out, and if you have not gotten the chance to try it, I highly encourage you to do so. It is quite possibly one of the best ad clear builds I've ever seen. So real quick, in order to have context for the Glaive buff and the Triton Vice buff, we first need to break down what the Triton Vice does. So let's get to it. Don't forget to drop a like because it really helps out a ton, and I hope you enjoy. So first things first, obviously the season is based around things like Solar, Stasis, and Strand, but this still feels like one of the strongest builds I've played so far this season. When I made this build last season, it felt like it was only really meant for insane ad clear, and it was meant only to fill that niche. But this season, the build feels genuinely incredible overall for a couple reasons. And before we talk about that, I should probably start by explaining what this build does. So I'm probably going to recycle a couple clips from my last Triton Vice video for this explanation, but anyways, the Triton Vice says that it increases the Glaive reload speed and melee damage when surrounded, Glaive melee final blows overflow around into the magazine, and Glaive projectile final blows detonate if the Glaive deals damage matching your subclass element. And the only thing we really care about on the Triton Vice is the last line of text that says that our Glaive projectiles detonate if we use a matching element Glaive. Which in this case is Arc because we are using the Unexpected Resurgence Trials Glaive with Voltshot along with Impulse Amplifier to increase our projectile speed and reload speed to proc Voltshot quicker. So here is an example of Voltshot in action. And here is an example of what the Triton Vice detonation perk does. And if we combine the two together, our Glaive becomes something out of the Avengers. It feels like 3 Trinity ghouls put together. And not to mention, we're also proccing Spark of Beacons, so if any target manages to survive our Jolt chain, they're gonna get blinded. All we gotta do is be amplified, which is easily achieved with the aspect flow state that makes us amplified by defeating a jolted target. So with that explanation out of the way, we can talk about the buffs. So first of all, Glaive projectile speed got increased by 30%, which when you pair that along with Impulse Amplifier, it almost feels like hit scan. It's ridiculous. And Glaive projectile damage got increased by 25%, which obviously just overall makes this build 25% stronger than it was last season, because all we do is shoot Glaive projectiles. And there's also a new feature where Glaive shields regenerate themselves at 1% per second, which allows us to block more consistently, which is insanely good for survivability because Glaive shields make you a tank. But now let's talk about the Triton Vice buff. They increased the damage your Glaive melee deals when surrounded from 30% bonus to 100%. And that's crazy. But the problem is that this build, for the most part, does not want to use the Glaive melee. It only wants to use projectiles, because the Triton Vice says that Glaive melee final blows will overflow around into the magazine. And what happens when we do that? We cannot reload to proc Voltshot. That is a huge problem. Although typically when you come across a fatter target, you don't want to waste 9 Glaive projectiles at them to pick up the kill. You typically want to use your Glaive melee to get them weak first, and then pick up the kill with the projectile to proc Voltshot. And now that we do 100% more Glaive melee damage when surrounded, this build's damage output actually became something serious. Like I said before, last season this build was niche and only really meant for heavy ad clear, but now it can actually carry its weight in damage as well. But there's also one more reason that this build just became better this season, and that is because of the mod nerfs. I'm not about to read this all out, but I'll put it on the screen for you. So ability spam is at an all-time low now, but not for Arc, because we create ionic traces at a rapid pace with Spark of Ions, which says defeating a jolted target creates an ionic trace. And we're basically jolting targets every second with our Voltshot Glaive. But the other thing about these mod nerfs is that orb generation is scarce now, but luckily this build is an orb printing machine. There is a possibility that this build generates more orbs than any other build in the game. With the combination of Arc Siphon along with Spark of Amplitude, our Glaive double kills are creating not 1 but 2 orbs for multi-kills, and sometimes 3 if we proc Reaper. As long as there's adds to kill, we are creating about an orb a second. And this is incredible for survivability because of a specific mod combination we're running, which is Recuperation along with Powerful Attraction. This setup is basically build your own Wormhusk crown. So with powerful attraction, we can dodge to scoop up all the orbs within 12.5 meters of our radius, and when we do so, recuperation gives us chunks of health back. So we can basically bot walk around with our Glaive shield up, just shooting, reloading, shooting, reloading, shooting, reloading, continually proccing our arc, siphon, amplitude combo, spitting out orbs, and if we get low on health, we just dodge, scoop up the orbs, and get our health back. And note that when we dodge, we're also proccing lethal current, so we can just fly in for a free supercharged arc punch. And if you were wondering, Glaive ammo is not a concern for this build because we are running the infinite special setup, which is basically just the copy of charged up on your chest, stacks on stacks in your boots, and special finisher on your class item. So charged up allows us to hold 4 stacks of armor charge, stacks on stacks gives us 2 armor charge instead of 1 when we pick up an orb, and you already know this build makes tons of orbs. Special finisher consumes 3 armor charge when we perform a finisher to give us a free brick of special ammo. That brings us back down to 1 armor charge, so we find 1 more orb, that gets us back up to 3, and we can immediately do another special finisher. It's a great setup to run when you're using a build based around a special weapon. And with 1 copy of Arc Reserves on your chest, we can hold up to 28 Glaive ammo, which is incredibly good ammo economy, and I would also recommend using an arc heavy weapon because of this reserve mod. You can go with something like an Anarchy, and you can run Hungry in your top slot for range, but I prefer using the Wendigo because of how easy it is for this build to proc explosive light. And the beauty of this build is that your main weapon doesn't take up your exotic slot, so you have more freedom in your loadout options. So you can pair this build along with the Wish Ender, which is undisputably the best endgame weapon for Grandmaster Nightfalls. And on a side note, this build is also a 100 discipline grenade spam build with certain mod setups to help that out, but I'm not really going to get into that since this video was meant to be short and I already explained that part in my last Triton Vice video, so we're just going to wrap this one up here. I'm telling you guys, this build feels insanely good right now. I highly recommend giving it a try. You won't regret it. Go focus yourself some unexpected resurgences from Same 14 with your spare trials engrams. It doesn't have to be adept. Mine isn't adept and it still feels great. Just get yourself this roll, do yourself a favor. As always, I'll leave a dim loadout link to this build down below in the description and the pinned comment if you'd like to give it a try. And if you got any buddies who are hunter mains, I'd appreciate if you share the video with them. I'm sure they'd find it enjoyable. And if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate if you dropped a like and a comment because interacting with the video like that really helps out the algorithm and goes a long way. So clicking on something is very helpful. And if you are new here, please consider subscribing. Would love to have you here. And with that, I'll catch you in the next video. See you later.